Hey, it's Leo. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a December wrap-up plus one book that I forgot in November. I thought about doing a retrospective on 2021, looking at stats or best of, and I might just keep on moving. Go to 2022, don't look back. We'll see. What about you? Did you do any kind of retrospective review of 2021? Let me know, I'd love to hear about it. With each video, I lift up a different nonprofit that's doing good in the world. I'll make a donation, and I encourage you to check them out. Like, share, follow, or donate as you are inspired. With this video, I'll be lifting up the Indigenous Environmental Network. Established in 1990 within the United States, IEN was formed by grassroots Indigenous peoples and individuals to address environmental and economic justice issues. IEN's activities include building the capacity of Indigenous communities and tribal governments to develop mechanisms to protect our sacred sites, land, water, air, natural resources, health of both our people and all living things, and to build economically sustainable communities. IEN accomplishes this by maintaining an informational clearinghouse, organizing campaigns, direct actions, and public awareness, building the capacity of community and tribes to address EJ issues, development of initiatives to impact policy, and building alliances among Indigenous communities, tribes, intertribal and Indigenous organizations, people of color, ethnic organizations, faith-based and women groups, youth, labor, environmental organizations, and others. IEN convenes local, regional, and national meetings on environmental and economic justice issues and provides support, resources, and referral to Indigenous communities and youth throughout primarily North America and in recent years, globally. So I'm going to make a donation to Indigenous Environmental Network, and I'll encourage you to check them out. All right, between the one book I forgot in November and the books I read in December, I've got 15 books to cover, but I'm going to try to do it in a pretty quick manner. 4 of those, turns out, were Terry Pratchett books. So there we go. The first I read in November was Monstrous Regiment. And this is the story of Polly Perks, who joins the army in order to find her brother, Paul. And there's reasons for that, including trying to keep the tavern that she and her family run, which can only be passed down to the male heir in her country. This book is so great. It covers things such as nationalism and war and sexism and the power of a well-placed pair of socks to change people's perceptions or one's own perception of oneself. The characters are fantastic. The storyline is really good, and I really enjoyed it. So I gave this one 5 stars, and I encourage you to check it out. I also read Hogfather as part of a read-along with Katya Reed Write and Create and Scott of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot and Rosie Cockshut. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I didn't love it quite as much as Going Postal or Monstrous Regiment, but I really enjoyed it. My favorite parts were the bits with Susan and Death. Terry Pratchett is just a comedic genius. I also felt like a lot of it was probably going over my head in terms of some aspects of probably British society, maybe particularly the universities and some of the references they were making there, or he was making there. I guess I should tell you what it's about. Basically, there's a organization, I'll just describe it as that, and you'll have to read it, the Auditors, who put out a hit on Hogfather, which is sort of like similar to our Santa Claus. And so this assassin goes and kidnaps and tries to kill the Hogfather. And so because Hogfather is missing, then Death steps in and, goes to all of the different houses and is delivering toys to the children and so forth. Susan is Death's granddaughter, and she also then gets in on the adventure and is trying to figure out what happened to Hogfather. So much cleverness and really fun scenes. They go after looking for what happened to the Tooth Fairy. Then there's these other magical creatures that are created as part of what's going on. It's hard to explain, but I definitely recommend you check it out. Another book I read by Terry Pratchett in December was Snuff. In this book, Commander Sam Vimes of the Ankh-Morpork City Watch goes on vacation. He goes with his wife and their young son to her country estates, and there they unearth a horrible crime, and he goes about trying to solve it because he does not want to be on vacation. He wants to be solving crimes. This book touches on some pretty serious issues as well, but also with a light touch and some good humor. And so I think you'll enjoy that. I'm trying to remember, maybe it's because I read 4 Terry Pratchett's in a row, or in a month, but I wrote on here that I gave it a 4 star, and I can't remember why I would put it 4 instead of 4.5. So let me know. Have you read Snuff? Let me know what you think of it and what your rating is. The last Terry Pratchett novel I read in December was The We Free Men, and that was because my library hold came up and it was available. So I thought, all right, let's go for it. I gave this one 4.5 stars. This is the first in the Discworld series where we see the young witch Tiffany Aching, and I really enjoyed her. I think that Terry Pratchett does just a great job with female characters. I really enjoyed Polly and Susan and Tiffany, and loved that they loved the way that their stories were told. In this story, her younger brother is kidnapped by the Queen of the Elves, and so she grabs her frying pan and goes after him, after her, to try to get him back. She has the help of the local Nac Mac Feegle, the We Free Men, who are a clan of fierce, sheep-stealing, sword-wielding, 6-inch high blue men. So they go on this adventure to rescue her little brother. Gave this one 4.5 stars and would recommend that as well. The next book I want to talk about is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. Ran across this one looking for a book to round out December, and I'm really glad I did. I gave it 4.5 stars. The story of this bank robbery turned hostage situation and the blurb really confused me, and it took me a little while to get into. The story is told with multiple timelines of like during the hostage situation and after the hostage situation. But don't worry, the hostage situation, this isn't a thriller. It's not really a hostage situation. It's hard to describe. But I will say that this book would have a trigger warning, but that I think is why the book was written. It's a book that explores suicide and encourages people to hang on. And in fact, at the end of the book, there are references for, reaching out to the suicide hotline and so forth. I just thought that the characters were really well done. The story was really interesting. What was amazing to me was that the characters started off, this much about them, and they really could have, if we never learned more about them, maybe they would have been like a cardboard cutout. And then we just got deeper and deeper and deeper with them, and just there was so much depth and warmth and interesting stuff about each of the characters. So I recommend you check it out. I'm being mindful of the trigger warning, but I recommend it. I also read Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, and I mentioned in my last video that I didn't really get on with this. I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. I understand where he was going with it in terms of like an unlikable character that really depicts the self-loathing of someone who is trying to not admit that they are a gay man. And obviously this was written in 1956, and so, not where we're at now. But I didn't find David, the protagonist, likable. That's probably the point. But there were some scenes in the bar in Paris where David is describing, either when he describes like effeminate gay men or when he describes what I presume would be trans women or drag queens, and it was really offensive. And maybe the point was that that's because he's the self-loathing gay man that's trying to hide it and self-destructing and destroying all of those around him as well. But it was uncomfortable. So I think it's an important part of literary canon, and I'm glad I read it. And I'd love to know your thoughts about that. And did those pieces jump out or bother you? And what was your star rating for that book? So I gave it 3.5. The next book I read was Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This is an Afrofuturistic sci-fi novella that was published in 2015, I believe. The protagonist's name is Binti, and she is the first of the Himba people ever to be offered a place at UMZA University, which is the finest institution of higher learning in the galaxy. So she has to leave home and travel in a spaceship to go to the university, which is something that her people haven't done before. Of course, then she runs into an issue, and there's crisis, and the adventure ensues. The world building and characters on this were incredible. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad that this is the first in a series. I think that this is a character and a storyline that I really want to follow. So I definitely recommend Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Next I read Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. This is the winner of the 2019 Booker Prize, and I like this description of the book. It's a magnificent portrayal of the intersections of identity and a moving and hopeful story of an interconnected group of Black British women that paints a vivid portrait of the state of contemporary Britain and looks back on the legacy of Britain's colonial history in Africa and the Caribbean. And the 12 women there have very different lives. They're different socioeconomic classes. We have non-binary, we have lesbian, we have straight folks. I give this book a 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I can see why she won the Booker for this, but it wasn't one that I loved or that I would reread. I was impressed how she could shift the narrative from the different point of view of these different characters, and each voice definitely felt authentically from that character, and then the way the stories wove together, it was really good. On a totally different note then, I read another book set in London, which was Solace by Gail Carriger, which is a paranormal romance. But I didn't realize it was a paranormal romance. I thought it was more like a paranormal mystery where this woman was going to solve crimes. I mean, yes, but mostly it's a romance. And so the first time there was sexy times, I was like, oh, that's the kind of book we're reading. But it was good. I gave it 3.5 stars. The first in a series about Alexia Terabati, who doesn't have a soul, and so therefore she is able to basically render vampires and werewolves and so forth back into human form when she touches them. And she's then, along with this werewolf and her vampire buddy, going to then solve a mystery of why these other folks are turning up and causing havoc. So I enjoyed it. Again, it wasn't what I expected, but maybe I should have paid more attention to the blurb. But again, I'm glad I read it, and it was fun. I also then read books 2 and 3 in the Wondersmith series. So book 2 was The Calling of Morgan Crow, and book 3 was Hollowpox, The Hunt for Morgan Crow. Both of those are by Jessica Townsend, and I give both of them 4.5 stars. I basically binged books 1 through 3 of the Wondersmith series. They're so good, and really what I needed to read. Okay, in The Calling of Morgan Crow, we see her in her first year in school and the struggles that go along with that. She's really not accepted at all by the teachers and a lot of the staff and students because she's a Wondersmith, and so there's struggles with that, and then her class is being blackmailed to keep secret, and there's a lot of friction in the class about that. I would say it's a medium-paced book, but a really good adventure and great characters, and that I think was my favorite part of it. Book 3 is The Hollowpox, The Hunt for Morgan Crow, and in this book there's this disease that is attacking the Wunimals, which are like the talking animals, and it's basically this virus or parasite or something unknown that is causing them to turn into wild animals and rage and then go into a coma. And this book really dives into a lot of the prejudices of trying to respond to a disease that is striking one portion of the community, and some really powerful portrayals of how people then become a mob and can really start to try to take away civil rights of other groups out of fear and bigotry. So great exploration of that, pretty timely, and basically I recommend the entire Nevermore series, and I hope that you check them out. The last 4 books that I want to talk about were all mysteries, and so that was fun. So I read An Extravagant Death, which is book 14 in the Charles Lennox mysteries by Charles Finch. I had been a huge fan of the earlier series of that book, like up through 11, and then I haven't had a chance to read them for a while. So I was kind of diving in, checking to see if it lived up to my memories of how much I loved it. And I don't know if my expectations were a little too high. I gave it a 4 star. A good mystery, good book. So Charles Lennox then comes over to the US to do some investigation. This is in 1878, and the community that he winds up in is this really wealthy community, and I wasn't really so interested in hearing about the rich people, so maybe that's my own bias. And then I was a little bit put off by who the murderer was, but it was a decently put together mystery, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book is Wicked Autumn by G.M. Malliot, and this is the first in a series with the character Max Tudor, who is MI5, then became a vicar in quaint English village of St. Edswalds. And so I think it's, a fun concept with basically a, Miss Marpley small town setting, and then this detective, but he also happens to have detective experience or spy experience from MI5, and then all of the intrigues of the town. It was pretty good. Again, I wasn't super excited with the reveal of who the killer was. Then I read Murder at the Mena House by Erica Ruth Neubauer, and this was set in Egypt in 1926. And there's this American Jane Wonderly. She's a young widow, and she goes there with her Aunt Millie, and then a murder happens and she decides to investigate. It's a little bit over the top in terms of how she inserts herself into the investigation. There's also trigger warnings for domestic violence, but it was a pretty good mystery. The last book I read was Nemesis by Agatha Christie, which is a Jane Marple mystery. In this one, Jane Marple receives a letter from her old friend Jason Raphael via his lawyers because he has passed away, and he has a challenge for her, and if she completes that challenge, then he will give her £20,000. And he calls on her because of her special skills, he says. I'm very familiar with and love the adaptation, and I think that was a hindrance to me in this situation because I really loved the adaptation, and there are pieces to it that were different that bothered me. In the book, it just took a long time for her to figure out what the mystery was. Fundamentally, it was the same mystery and the same murderer, which I'm not a fan of the murderer or that setting, but it was pretty good. And I'm glad I read it. It was the second Agatha Christie that I've read. It does make me worry about how much, when I love these adaptations and then the book isn't going to match, and, which parts of it I love that aren't in there. But I'm glad I read it, and I'll read more Agatha Christie, of course. And of course, rewatch these adaptations because they're great. Anyway, that was my December +1 in November reading month. How did your reading go in December? What are you looking forward to reading in 2022? I'd love to continue the conversation in the comments below. Please feel free to like, share, subscribe, and all of those things if you'd like. Until next time, happy reading.